Nice. It looks like we've got folks in. So, welcome everyone. I'm just going to get my introduction ready. Whoop. Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to our first webinar in the series where we're concentrating today on creating a group and getting community support to lay the groundwork for a community-led housing project. So a bit of housekeeping first before I go on to introductions. If this is your first time in a webinar, welcome. You'll notice that you don't have audio or video on. So it's not quite like a Zoom meeting. You'll stay like that for the duration of the webinar, but there will be an opportunity to come onto the screen later if you would like to. I'll explain how you do that now. So at the bottom, along the bottom of your screen, you'll see some buttons. These enable you to participate in a couple of ways. So you can ask a question using the Q&A box, or you can raise a hand, and that alerts me as the host that you would like to join with your audio and video to ask a question. We'll be having our presentations from guest speakers first, so if you raise a hand during this time, I won't come to you until the second half of the webinar, which is dedicated to questions. There's another chat box on the right side where you can put general comments, links, resources, etc. that other participants may find helpful. But do make sure if you specifically have a question that you want answering, that it goes into the Q&A box at the bottom, because I'll be monitoring that a bit more closely. This webinar is being recorded, so we can share it with people in the future. You can ask your question anonymously in the Q&A box if you don't want to be identified. So yeah, moving on to introductions. My name is Hannah. I'm facilitating today. And I work with Colin McDonald, who's also here, on the Wessex Community Housing Hub. The Hub provides support and guidance for people in the Wessex area on their community housing journey. And we're also joined today by two great guest speakers who will be sharing their experiences of this stage of community-led housing. So first we'll be hearing from Anna Hope, and she's a founder member and resident of The Yard, a 40-house self-build neighbourhood in Bristol, and also Eco-Motive, a worker co-op which exists to help people realise their community housing projects. And she's also doing a PhD in community housing, very busy. And after that, we'll be hearing from Rosemary Heath-Coleman, who's also equally very busy. She's founder, member, chair and trust secretary of the Queen Camel Community Land Trust in Somerset, which has sort of multifaceted projects going on, which she'll tell us all about. We'll have presentations for half an hour, and then we can move on to questions. And Colin, who is the Hub's community housing advisor, is also on hand to help answer any questions as well. And once we've finished, I've got all of your emails, so I'll be sending out a follow-up email of any resources we've discussed, slides that have been shared, so you can look them back over again if you'd like to. But without further ado, I will now hand over to Anna.
Thanks very much, Hannah. I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm just going to see if I can share my... Oh, hang on. Oh, Hannah, could you just enable me to screen share, please? Yeah, thanks. I've been invited to speak about projects from an urban perspective and a brownfield perspective. And I've got the experience I'm going to be sharing today is of a community-led housing group called Ashley Vale Action Group. That we set up, I helped co-found in year 2000. So it's going back quite a way now. That project, which I'll talk to you about in a moment, completed about 10 years ago, but more recently we started a second project. So I'm going to use both of those as an example. Hopefully this will work. Ah, great. So just to start off with, I wanted, and the theme that we're talking about is, it's about building membership and how to reach out and engage with the community and get the support of the community. I wanted to start with was looking at because when I started kind of thinking about this, really, like, who is the community? And actually, this is the topic of my PhD, so I'm kind of a bit nerdy about it, really. Who is the community that we're trying to reach? And there are different kind of levels of this, as far as I see it, and from my experience, is you start off with really a wider, the overall community. I've tried to represent it. There's a bit of a diagram so you can see it with this green dotted line around the edge. This is your wider community. And there's different types of community that could be represented by a housing project, depending on what your remit is, who you're trying to house, who you're trying to benefit from your project. So for example, it could be a community of place, like a neighborhood of a town or a city, or indeed a village. So your community could be all the people who live there, perhaps people who work there as well. But it might also be a community of interest. It might be a community of people with particular needs, for example, the homeless community, or a community of people with disabilities, or community of single parents in need of affordable housing. So, I mean, actually a group could represent any kind of community, and they might not necessarily all be from a defined geographical area. It might be a community of choice, for example, people who choose to live together. Maybe it's a community of friends, or people with a common interest like ecological housing, or permaculture, for example. So all different kinds of communities, but that's effectively, they're the kind of people that you're trying to serve. But within that wider community, the actual group, when you set up and you legally incorporate your group, which you'll need to do to make the project happen, that group is going to need an official membership, which I've drawn in blue there. So they're people who have signed up officially, they've got a name on the list, they might have paid a small subscription. And within that, you then have to have your governing board, your board of directors, your board of trustees, depending on what kind of constitution you have. So that's your community group, if you like. But then you've also got your future residents, or the residents of the group, if the house is already there. And that, again, is a kind of subgroup of your official membership. And you may well have a broader membership beyond just the people who are going to be living there. So just bear that in mind. And just as a parallel example, if you were actually a group that was, say you're a co-housing group or co-op that was being set up just by the people who wanted to live there, then it might be a bit simpler, because actually the only members you've got are the people who are going to be the residents as well, or who are the residents. That's a little bit simpler. But you might still have this wider community of people who are interested, who might want to live there in the future, and they're thinking about it. And again, that might be a wider community of support there. So just coming back to, I just wanted to look at why these different aspects or elements of your community are going to be important for your project. So just starting on the left, if you look at the official membership, these are the people who are kind of signed up members to your organisation, however that looks. Why is it important to have members of your group? Why can't you just have a small number of directors and you manage it all yourselves without looking further out to the people you're serving? So the official membership are there really, I mean, they're actually your organisation. They're the people who give it legitimacy. They're the people who you can demonstrate. Say if you're talking to local council, you can say, look, we have 50 members. We have 200 members, or maybe more. You know, that makes the council set up, or whoever, whichever stakeholders you're trying to work with. But it also provides accountability. It means that the decisions made by the governing board, you're going to check that out with your members. And that means that you're going to make stronger decisions, hopefully, because you're really looking to serve that membership. You're not going to get too kind of internally focused. As I said, looks good to other stakeholders as well. Your official membership is probably also your pool of people who are going to carry out a lot of the work on the project, whether as unpaid volunteers, perhaps some of them even get paid roles within the project, but certainly considering all the roles that need to happen to make a community housing project happen, the more members, or the stronger the membership, the more engaged that membership is, the more likely you're going to be able to carry out all those activities together. Your membership might also be the pool of future residents that are going to live there. So if you're developing a housing project and you're going to build 20 homes, you want to know that there's going to be enough interest in those homes once they're built. So your membership may well be a pool of people. So if some members drop out, if some tenants drop out, you know you've got more people lined up who are interested in living there. And they're also probably going to be the majority of people who are on your governing board. So generally speaking, the governing board of community housing projects are elected from the membership, although sometimes people are co-opted on from outside as well to be experts. Then your wider community then, the kind of green area, that community of place or of interest or of choice, that these are the people that you're also serving, even if they might not have explicitly signed up to say, I want to become a member. You're still probably looking to serve that wider community, because you want to make sure that the project you're proposing is going to be acceptable to the people in the neighbourhood, to other people who might be interested, to other supporters who might, for example, support your planning application. So when you want to design your scheme, you want to generate ideas, you want to get good ideas from people, and the more people you've got to ask and consult about that, the stronger your proposition is going to be, and then the more likely you're going to get support when you put it forward for planning permission. And the more people you can get to write into the council in support of your scheme, or certainly at least not to object to it, the more chance you have of creating a successful project. And also with fundraising, for example, now things like community share offers or crowdfunding are becoming more and more important and popular ways of getting schemes going. So if you've got people you can tap into to invest, even if it's just a few pounds, or maybe it's a few £1,000s, this is a really important resource. And then thirdly, your pipeline, or your kind of pipeline of residents, your residents group, that's going to be important to make your scheme stack up. As I said, if you're building homes, you need people to live in them. And also you want to be consulting those people to make sure that the homes are actually going to meet their needs. So if you end up building loads of 1-bed flats and then it turns out that all your future residents want 3 or 4-bed family homes, you haven't met their needs. So certainly to make sure that you're actually serving what is needed in your area. So I'm going to skip on now to a couple of case studies. As I mentioned, this is the first project that I've been involved in, which started in 2000. Ashley Vale Self Build, we also call it The Yard, which is the name of the road running through the site. It was an old scaffolding yard, actually. It's in central Bristol, and it's a community-led self-build project of 42, and they're private homes. So this is different from the majority of community housing projects, which tend to be perhaps like affordable tenures, and the homes are owned collectively by a community organisation. These homes are all owned privately, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as I go through the case study. But the residents do co-own this. If you see that on the left, there's a kind of circular garden that's co-owned by all the residents of the housing project. And then the wider community organisation that set up the project, which is Ashley Vale Action Group, or AVAG, owns also a community room and 3 work units within the scheme as well, and that's rented out for local people. So what I wanted to use this example to talk about is the process by which AVAG, Ashley Vale Action Group, formed and engaged different parts of the community as the scheme developed. So this is a picture of the site as it looked to start off with. It's a 2-acre scaffolding yard in central Bristol. It came up for sale, and when there was no community housing group before this project, before the land came up for sale, but a bunch of local people saw it and thought we should take action. So they formed an initial group, and this was initially like literally down the pub, kind of, wow, what can we do about this? So a core group formed, and as yet that wasn't constituted. But then we realised one of the first things that we needed to do was actually constitute that group. So we set it up as Ashley Vale Action Group Limited, and within that we decided, well, who's going to be who are going to be the directors? And some people were happy to be directors, and others said, I don't really want to have that responsibility, but I'm happy to be a member. So out of that core kind of founding group of probably about 12 to 15 people, there were about 10 directors, I think, initially, don't remember exactly, but most people were directors. We set up, and so we had this legal entity, and then we thought, well, okay, we actually need to build our membership now. We need to let people know what we're up to. So there was leafleting of the local area, and inviting people to sign up to become a member for £1. And this was the key kind of initial stage to let people know and to kind of start getting that buy-in and energy towards developing plans. And our neighbourhood is actually very small. It's literally, there are probably about, let me say, probably about 100 homes and existing homes in the area. So it was a very tightly defined geographical area that we decided to represent as the community body. And then what happened after that was we started developing plans and went out to a wider consultation. And this is a picture here of an event that we had at a local farm fair in the area, where people came, and some of those people were residents of the local area. Some people came from a bit further afield, but we had this planning for real exercise where we engaged people, got lots of ideas, people had sticky post-it notes, and that really helped. And from that we developed a more detailed site proposition, a feasibility study, check it would stack up, and with the number of plots, so initially 20 self-built plots, and some housing association homes. That changed over time, but initially from that we knew, okay, we've got 20 plots there to offer out. So then we had to work out who's going to build these homes. Now the way the project stacked up was that we would sell each of those plots privately, and that would generate enough income to buy the whole site and have the residue left over for the community group. So that was the model we went to. So we needed to get 20 self-builders who could each come up with a chunk of money on a certain date, and who would also sign up to some ethos around the project. I'll talk about that a bit more later on, but effectively the self-builders, the way we advertised for the self-builders was it was partly word of mouth, and there were things like children who kind of in their 20s, let's say, of some of the existing residents of the area who couldn't afford to buy or rent locally. So people kind of brought in people they knew, or like myself, I was already a director and I put myself forward to be a self-builder. So it was a word of mouth, and we also advertised in some local publications, like local kind of newsletters that went out to slightly wider neighbourhood, perhaps, you know, the surrounding 1,000 or so homes. And most people eventually, I would say most people came from about a kind of 1 to 2 mile radius of the site, with a couple coming from further afield, but it was pretty local. What I would say was we didn't really pay a lot of attention at that stage to kind of, I don't know, equal opportunities or anything. It was literally like, right, we need to buy this site, who can we find that's interested? I'll say a little bit more on that later on, but that was how it happened. And we had then a waiting list. We had 20 people on the list, plus a waiting list of maybe up to 20 people as well. We actually went through that waiting list. And actually everyone who was on the waiting list had the opportunity to get a plot. So always make sure you've got way more people on the list than you have homes. Then we went through a detailed design process, which involved principally the directors of AVAG and the self-builders together to work out, well, what are the individual homes going to look like? We had an architect to guide that. And then when we actually came to buying the site, we then had to separate out, because what had to happen is there had to be contracts between AVAG as a legal entity and the individual self-builders who were each buying a plot. So the self-builders who were directors of AVAG had to resign so that we could then avoid the conflicts of interest. And then we went ahead and bought the site. And then when we bought it, some of the plots went to the self-builders individually and some of the land went to AVAG. And further things happened, but that was the kind of core of how we kind of developed that process. And the key things I would say we learned from that, or kind of key elements to bear in mind, because it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't like a really typical project for community-led housing, but I think it's got useful learning. So the membership of AVAG was anyone could join, provided the key criteria was that you lived in this very confined geographical area. And the reason we did that was we wanted to make sure that the project really served and benefited that area. So we wanted any revenue from the scheme to be able to be reinvested in other local projects. We definitely wanted to be very locally controlled. As I said, we recruited the self-builders just by word of mouth, local adverts, and the criteria that people signed up for, because we were unable to provide affordable self-built plots, and that was because we had to buy the site on the open market and we had no subsidies. So we simply had to make sure that people would sign up. People had to sign up to a kind of written declaration or contract that said we agreed to build using ecological materials. And we had to pay a 10% deposit up front, and we had to at least declare that we had access to the money to buy the plot when on the date that the transfer took place. So that was it. And apart from that, there were no other criteria, like you didn't have to be a first-time buyer, you didn't have to be on the housing register. And so, you know, in retrospect, it might have been nice in a way to kind of say, okay, well, let's really target first-time buyers more. But actually, practically speaking, when it came up to it, we needed every one of those people who came forward to buy the site. Otherwise, the sale would have fallen through. So it was very pragmatic. when the self-builders came in, I just would say a good learning here is that I think it wasn't clear enough. AVAC hadn't kind of quite developed the project enough so that people knew exactly what they were buying into, and that led to some conflicts a bit further down the line, where decisions were being made and then the self-builders wanted one thing and AVAC wanted the other thing, and it was hard to kind of navigate that process. So it's well worth, once you're bringing in the tenants, it's well worth them knowing very clearly, these are the things that are set out in advance and these are the things that you can have a decision on. We tried to limit the conflicts of interest by separating out the interests of the residents from the interests of the wider community as much as we could. And just to note that now, when new people come in, when new members come in effectively, as residents, those homes are sold on the open market. So there's literally AVAC has no influence over the new people coming in. And so the community is it's very organic in the sense of who comes in. So how are we doing on timing? I'm just going to go through the second project here, which is Bridge Farm. So this project started, and this is also led by the same organisation, Ashley Vale Action Group. And it started more recently, around 2018, I think. The site was initially kind of found and purchased. So it's a community-led redevelopment of an old farm, basically, also like pretty close into Bristol. And I think I talked about it before in the last webinar. So this is the site, and it's 3.5 acres, and it's farmland and some old farm buildings. And we're proposing now to include much more focus on the affordable housing, as well as a wider range of non-housing uses, cafe space, a kind of an event space, and work units, and lots of food growing. Again, we're going to be basing it largely on self-build, and we haven't decided the ownership model yet. So in this case, we already had the community organisation set up there, and that organisation was then able to move quite quickly to put in an offer for the site, which was accepted. That was 2018. We then had to move very quickly to get some fundraising so we could actually buy the site. And we already had, fortunately, because we'd done one project, we already had a kind of support. We had a membership. We had, social networks in the area that we were able to pull on. Now, Bridge Farm is it's interesting because it's not in the actual neighbourhood of Ashley Vale. So it's kind of funny because you've got this community housing organisation that is now making a development outside of its specific community of interest. It's still local, it's less than a mile away. So this was a bit ambiguous when you kind of say local residents. So we basically initially had to move very quickly within a small number of weeks to fundraise. So we basically just kind of everyone who was a member or knew about the project put out their social networks, and we had to raise about £500,000, which we raised with kind of friends and family loans. So that was a really key element of drawing on the wider community. And I've put two communities in here because the local residents is one community, but I've also put a broader community of interest because, I mean, someone who invested lived in Switzerland, and they happened to be just a friend of one of the directors who said, oh, that sounds interesting. So this is a much broader project where we're kind of drawing on other people to input into it. So the site was purchased, and then the project was promoted. Again, what we wanted to do is then that kind of really like draw in more specifically people to get involved in the project. And again, we reached out to local residents and also through wider social networks, through social media, contacting different groups, the permaculture group, because it was particularly a growing project. So getting people to come in, and people came in from a mix of local people and people from further across Bristol, some from further afield too. And then to actually get the ideas going for the project, we really wanted to give anyone from either of those kind of interest groups the ability to join a working group. So we established a number of different working groups who then who have been feeding into different areas of the kind of idea development. So for example, there's a land group, people who are kind of working up, well, what should we do with the land? What should we do about growing space in the land? There's a kind of communications and decision-making group looking at the protocols for how we decide things. There's a renewable energy group, there's a new build housing group, etc. So each of those, and anyone could join one of those groups. It's very open membership, anyone who is interested. and they've been operating, feeding in to the EDVAG directors. On top of that, what we felt was really important, because we owned the land, which was amazing, we had this resource to actually start building community even before we even knew what would go on the site. So, for example, running regular kind of 1 day a month volunteering on the land days, where weekly and up until lockdown, a weekly veg market and pizza nights, pizza oven. So this is all about getting just the people of the neighbourhood engaged. We're next to a local school, so invited after school, people could come by with their kids, buy their veg, have pizza, keeping it really, really open and keeping that energy of activity going. That's been really successful. And even during lockdown, of course, we had to stop most of those things, but people have still been coming and growing veg on the land, and it looks really beautiful there. And recently, I mean, evidence that this has worked really well. We had a consultation day in early August where we put forward the outline plans, and over 350 people attended. I think I have frozen, so I'm just going to quit if I can.
I can still hear you.
Oh, you can? Oh, that's
yeah,
weird.
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Oh, you can? Okay, I've just
your video. Oh, although now I think audio's gone as well. Cool. Well,
my computer's malfunctioning. But oh, hang on. Can you see my screen?
Yes, can still see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, this is just it. Just to wrap up, then, it really one key thing to mention is that what we've been very clear about from the start is come and get involved. It's very much we want to encourage people to come forward and bring ideas. Oh, if you want to build a pizza oven, great, come build a pizza oven. There's a lot of openness, but we're not guaranteeing anyone housing through that. So we really want to, because we types of homes there'll be, so people can come and get involved, but we're trying to keep the residents kind of separate. But I think at some point there's going to be a need to manage the needs of all these different communities. Like, how do you balance the needs of people wanting homes, the needs of people who want to grow vegetables on the land? So I think that's going to be an interesting theme to explore later on. But that's it from me. And sorry, I don't know if I went a bit over there, but hopefully that's useful, and we'll have a good discussion in a moment.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great stuff. Thank you so much, Anna. That's really, really helpful. Really great walkthrough. Great. So what I'll do, could you, I don't know if you saw my little message, but would you be able to, if you hover back over my name on the right hand side, would you be able to make me host again?
Oh, my Zoom is actually like really malfunctioning. If I might just have to close my Zoom.
Don't worry, because I think I've got the share screen function, and actually, yeah. So if I get Rosemary's slides ready, and then
I'm just gonna. I know it's really malfunctioning. I'm gonna have to just quit Zoom and come back in, because I think I can't stop sharing. So
that's fine. No worries. Nice. Cool. So Rosemary, what I'll do is I'll just get your slides ready. I think I've got them. There we go. And I will also come and unmute you, because that would be helpful. I think you're already unmuted, aren't you? Great. Share
I've
screen.
just unmuted myself.
Brilliant. Oh, so I might need, I'm going to need to boot Anna out, actually. So,
oh no, yeah, please boot me out, because I can't get out of Zoom. It's kind of it's frozen me.
Aha. Let's have a look.
Otherwise, I'll just turn my computer off.
Oh, I might need you to do that, actually, because I think now I've transferred host to you.
All right.
Sorry.
I'm just literally gonna like kill my computer and see if I can get back in.
No worries. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries.
Otherwise, got your slides ready, Rosemary, and hopefully I shall resume my host powers. That means that I can do all of the booting.
She's frozen, isn't she?
She has, hasn't she? Yeah. I'm almost wondering. Classic webinar, isn't it? Let's have a look. Information. Reclaim host. Ha! I'm the host. Excellent. So I will share screen. get that one ready. Where's my slide? Great. Share. Oh, present, that's better. Great. All right, Rosemary, over to you.
Don't worry. You haven't got my slides up, have you?
Can you see them? I've just started screen sharing.
I've got a frozen screen with Anna on it and
Oh.
lots of little flags all over it.
Let's have a look. If I stop.
So Roxy Piper, though, he can see them or she can see them.
Good. Okay, that's good. I'm just wondering.
So if I look, I'll just carry on. I don't need to see the slides. If everyone else can see them, you just move them on.
Go ahead.
I mean, it doesn't matter if they're out of order. People will have to just understand.
Nice. Cool.
So all I'm going to say is good afternoon to everyone that's hidden from view. I actually lost my photographs, so I'm using a presentation called The Long Road to Roman Way. And that Long Road to Roman Way was our first housing project. And it's the name of the road within our housing project. So I was asked to speak to a couple of questions, actually by Colin. So he's to blame if what I'm saying isn't quite right. The first question was, who first identified that there was a housing need to be addressed? This is in Queen Camel. Well, do you remember parish plans? Way back in 2003, I was coerced into joining a steering group to put together a parish plan, which was the latest government initiative to involve local communities. Governments, whichever colour they are, have these initiatives. They're the big thing, and then you forget them. The response to the parish plan questionnaire highlighted that local young people could not afford to remain in the village. There were no houses that were affordable for them. So in 2005, going back a bit, the parish plan was launched. The implementation was through newly formed parish groups. So it was part of the parish council. One was planning and development. And in 2007, that group organised the first housing needs survey. And this identified 14 households in need. At that time, by the way, I had never heard of a CLT. But at some time thereabouts, I became involved in the forerunner of Wessex and saw the value and need for such an organisation in my own village. By the way, I was a councillor all this time as well. So in 2009, the Planning and Development Group issued a development plan, and this included a recommendation that a CLT was formed to take forward the provision of affordable housing. The CLT was inaugurated in December 2011, and its founding directors were the members of what had been the Planning and Development Group. In the lead up to this, a second housing needs survey was done, this time identifying 30 households with such a need. In other words, the CLT was spawned by the parish council, very much council orientated and working very closely with the parish council. That's important when I come to the end of this little talk. In 2014, we had 20 affordable houses, 16 rent, 4 shared ownership, up to 80%, and only 3 resident changes since then. The land held is in perpetuity. The house is owned by Hasto Housing Association, with the CLT receiving an annual ground rent. And the slide that's shown at the moment has a third bullet which says all landowners of possible sites receive the same letters. Something that was very important to us, and I think is important to all when you're doing a housing in a place, unless the land has been given by the council or there's other circumstances, treat every landowner exactly the same. give them the same letter, give them the same information. They will come forward or not, and then you read them out. But you don't want landowners coming to you afterwards and saying, you didn't ask me. So then we come to the communication aspect, which was the second part that Colin asked me to speak about, communications. Well, our primary or main communication to our parish has always been the annual parish meeting, which we called the annual village meeting. Now, when we started the parish plan in 2003, 2005, there were about 10 to 20 people at most who attended that annual meeting. From the launch of our parish plan onwards, attendance increased to 120 and upwards. And it's been that number every year until recently. And that was because we introduced hospitality. If you like to interpret hospitality as tickets with free wine on the end and nibbles, and information display stands with PowerPoint presentations. So people came. Now, did they just come for the wine, or did they come for the information? Or did they come for both? We also held a number of ad hoc village meetings, similar format to the annual parish meeting, but with only one agenda item, CLT housing. We also included the abutting parish councils in our invitations, posters for our public meetings. We also always had 2 pin boards, one with age sections and one a map of the parish. These showed who we were engaging with, and more importantly, who we were not engaging, not by name, but we could tell the age demographic and where they came from. At the same time, we were doing a neighbourhood plan. And part of the neighbourhood plan was communication, of course, and we engaged planning for real as well. It was interesting that the previous speaker talked about planning for real. This was a hands-on activity in which everyone across the age span could be involved, and so much more engaging than boring old questionnaires. There's a little picture now on the screen of our village, part of it. It was quite a nightmare putting the boards together. You can see lines where these 2-foot boards, 2-foot by 2-foot boards meet, polystyrene. And we use green garden string for hedges and heavy paper houses to size. Villagers were asked to place their flags, annotated with need, where they considered there was need. It wasn't just housing, it was dangerous roads. It covered every spectrum of work or in the society, in the village. But they also put their builder preferences as well. So I would highly recommend that type of engagement with a community. It's fun. And if we showed the next slide, you would see, yes, there they are putting their flags and discussing. And in the background, you can see some display boards where the information was on display. It's very engaging, far more so than a questionnaire. We skipped quite a lot of slides now, which you will have when you have a copy of this presentation. But if we go to the slide 20, that was a logo that we had to do. No, before that one. Oh, that one, yes. That gives the housing layout a concept of a farmhouse. It was interesting, or a farmyard. It was interesting that Anna was talking about a yard, and very much associated with farmyards and so on. We did not want our housing to be a straight line. So it was built on the complex that in the front, at the foreground, you've got Roman Way. And then there's a 4-bed house, which is like the farmhouse. And then you've got the farmyard with the sheds, that's other people's houses now, around. Very attractive complex, I think. The next slide, that one. Now, does anyone recognise a face on that screen? Bottom picture, on the left, perhaps the photograph doesn't do justice. I'm sure he looks as if he weighs 25 stone, but he's present on this webinar at the moment, and he's laughing because I can see his face. So the next one, and onwards, are just our house building as it went ahead. And while you see those photographs, I'll just say, my question from Colin, did we face any barriers in getting the message across? And if so, how did we overcome them? Well, actually, in respect of our housing, we faced no real barriers. We started within the parish council, so there were no barriers from that quarter, and the village was almost 100% in support, with the exception of one family who said they would lie across the entrance to stop us. But we had other hurdles. For instance, the discovery of archaeology. Now, in the next field adjacent to us, it was found that there was a Roman villa buried underneath, quite a significant Roman villa. And our field was standing on the ditches and the outbuildings. And to archaeologists, deep ditches are very important. So I think it was about 180,000 extra money on archaeology on top of, so it was an unexpected cost. We also had a significant flood in 2008, and some might say, well, what difference does that make to a housing that's way out of flood? Well, my house, where all the meetings were held, was held in the flood zone, and my house was flooded up to my knees. So paperwork and everything was out of, well, we didn't even know where it was. So that was a delay. And then, and this is very important, we had two very complete changes in our parish council, one in 2015 and another in 2019. And this can mean that a council that was opposed then becomes very for, or a council that was for can become very opposed. It's a bit like the change in government. So we had never thought about that before, taking it into account. So the question in hindsight, would we have done anything different? In respect of the housing, no. I think actually there might have been little tweaks, but we were very successful. But for our second project, which is the old school, which is the next photograph I've just added, to be developed as a community centre, and the whole of that picture shows the extent of what we've purchased. There were, or are, there has been opposition to such an extent that 6 members joined the parish council, and they are opposed to helping us or supporting us in any way. It's great sadness. We are working hard to restore the site as a community centre. We're already supporting people with needs. The far right corner, there's a window in that grade 2 listed building. Behind there is a gym, if I call it a gym. They've spent about £10,000 of their own money in it, our tenants, who look after children up to 18, even young adults who have got mobility needs. And it's going to be one of the best in the West Country. In the middle, underneath the bell tower, we have a tenant who is looking after young people who are on the autistic spectrum, and who also have some others who have been adopted, because often with adoption there are deep issues. And the window on the left is going to be our cafe. And we have a tenant there for the cafe, and we're, even as I'm sitting here talking to you, we have the people putting in the central heating across the road. And in the 1920s building, we have an anchor tenant. They're using the hall, which has got furniture being upcycled, taken from the rich and given to the poor, they say. And we have another therapist therapist who is looking after young people with serious mental health issues. And we also have art. We had even this morning an inquiry from another artist. And you can see some grass in the background, and that's the garden. And Onion Collective from Watch It are putting us in touch with an architect who's going to help us to develop that into a sensory garden next year, because everything that we're doing has been reduced. Our board of directors and a few volunteers are working their socks off because we can't have everyone that we used to have because of lockdown. And some of our helpers have got their own, if you like, mental health issues in their family, so they're vulnerable. Whoops, don't know what happened there. So that, oh, and then last bit, not least, can I just say about the CLT membership? For our first project, we had no mission statement as such, but members had to agree to the objects or aims. So when they sign their membership form, they do agree to the objects of the CLT. And that was largely because of the experience of our associate CLT in Norton-sub-Hampton, where they had dreadful happenings on their their first housing project. But recruitment of members, interestingly, during the affordable housing, we had only 35, mainly from the village. Following purchase of the old school, we launched a share offer, and our membership has now increased to over 130, and these are increasing even this week. And it confirms that we had been led to understand that affordable housing is of less interest to those not involved, whereas community hubs, centres, shops and pubs are, and membership grows to match. We started with a minimum of 1 share for membership. Every share is £1. At the share offer, we had a minimum of 25, and we're now going to 10. So if everyone on the screen, who I can't see, would like to become a member, for £10, they can become a member of our Community Land Trust and become involved in our school project in particular. Thank you. Bye.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Rosemary. That's really helpful, like a great insight into the process. I know you both had such a short time to be able to share it, so I'm really grateful. So I'm really keen to get to some questions now, and Colin, do feel free at any point to chip in if you'd like to. I'm also really interested, I'm going to launch a little poll that asks, where do you live? Just because I'm really interested in who we've got sort of from Devon, Dorset and Somerset, and if we've got folks from anywhere else in the UK. You don't have to answer, but just putting that there sort of for interest. So I've launched that now, if anyone's interested in letting me know. Great, so let's have a look at our first question. So I've got a question from Robin. He's asked, how do you attract the public / communicate with the public? So I know you've touched on some of those before, but what were some of your favourite methods, I think, to get out to people and communicate what you were doing? Is it social media or much more? Rosemary, I know you've mentioned notice boards and that kind of thing. So I've asked you, Anna, first, and I'll unmute you. That always helps.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think I would say I've been less involved in actually the outreach stuff directly, so I'm going to have to kind of guess in a way. But I mean, I know there has been quite a bit of, I know we've used Facebook probably mainly to communicate, and leaflets, but definitely the kind of events I talked about. We had a Bridge Farm, like these pizza evenings, and the veg market have just been, I think they've been incredible at the community building, because what it's done is it's trying to create a regular platform that's very, call it like low barrier, like, you know, anyone can come really. If you're really nervous about getting involved and you don't want to get involved as a volunteer, you want to just check it out, you live down the road, you just wonder what was happening, people just can come up and just check it out in a very relaxed and informal way. and there's always a few of the directors or active members there to chat to and have a look around. So I think that's been a really good example of getting people involved.
Nice. Yeah, Rosemary, same question for you.
Well, during the housing, it was largely formal meetings. During the old school, which we only bought in May last year we had regular Saturday working groups. We were outside and there was always the coffee and cake and all that sort of thing. We didn't actually have a pizza oven, but it's akin to that. That draws people. Food and drink always draws people.
Cake is a powerful tool.
Yeah, we were doing quite well with the working parties, and then of course it comes to winter, everything closes down, but we had inside events, the evening events that the wide community were invited to, and they came. We had art displays and so on, but then very quickly we were going to have a big open event to celebrate our first year in May, but of course by then we were in lockdown. So I did a presentation on the school and sent to all our members as a sort of instead of coming to see us. And we've been in lockdown and partial lockdown since. So, I mean, it wouldn't be possible for us to do a pizza event or anything like that because you're not allowed to, you can't do it. But what we do is we put an entry into the Village magazine every month. We have a website. We have two websites, actually. One is a CLT website, which is the more boring, perhaps, because it's the information and the background stuff. The other one is a marketing tool, and that's to do with the old school totally. And from that, there's a Facebook page, and I don't do it. Our administrator looks after both of those and keeps them update on an almost daily basis. So I think that's, and also I do communicate, or did in the past, before lockdown, with all the abutting parish councils, who you say, why parish councils? Well, they are the formal link within their villages, and they used to put the posters up for us and put it on their websites. So there is a communication channel that way. But I have to say that coronavirus has affected us not as much as Liverpool. We are very blessed where we are. We just have been so fortunate, but it still has an effect. And it's having an effect on, I was the co-leader of a village cafe in my village. I know this is not what we're talking about, but just to tell you the sadness and the reality of loneliness, we can't have village cafe now. Most of the people that came there were, you could say, were in the vulnerable category, because obviously young people would be at work, and this was in the week. One man I saw the week before last, sitting out in his car outside my drive, and I'm feeling quite emotional as I tell you. He said he comes regularly to sit outside just so that he can watch us go around because he's so lonely. So when we have our cafe, then we will be able to do things for the lonely people. And although we have to cover our costs, we're a mutual benefit society, not for profit. So we do have to charge. Of course we have to charge, but on the top, it's meeting need. And that need is whatever that need happens to be. And someone has asked the question down here, how will you address the concerns of the local community, such as those people that feel so strongly they have joined as members of the local parish council to meet the needs of, well, we are doing what we're doing, and the majority are very supportive. And we just have to do what we feel is right, communicate where we can, but they will either come round or not, but I don't know. You're on mute, Hannah. No, you're on mute. Well, you're on mute to me. No, I can't hear you. Colin, can you hear me, Hannah?
I think that maybe Hannah's microphone has packed in, because it doesn't look like she's on mute, but I can't hear her either.
Oh no.
Oh no, I can hear you now.
Can you hear
Right.
me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
now.
no. Oh, right, disappeared for a bit there.
Can I just take the opportunity of just saying a couple of words? Well, before
Definitely.
you
I
move on
just
to...
wanted to ask,
Okay.
I think, just because we've only got a few more minutes, I was wondering, Anna, if you could speak briefly, if you have had any sort of experience of opposition, and then we could go to closing thoughts, Colin. That, but not if you sort of don't want to add anything to that, Anna.
We did have some opposition to our yard project, which came, unfortunately, it came a little bit late for us to do anything about it, because the opposition came once the houses had started going up, more or less, which was a shame, because we could have dealt with it better earlier on. So we just had to kind of keep going in a way. But I think what was really hard is once something gets out on the internet, particularly, you can't get it back. So a bad news story went up online, and it was kind of everywhere. And for years, people were referring to this one really horrible news story, which was kind of from a very antagonistic journalist who'd spoken to a couple of neighbours, but it made it sound awful. So I don't know, we just had to kind of keep going. I don't know if I've got any top tips for that really, but I mean, the more that you can talk to the community, talk to people and allow them to feel like they have a say in the planning of it, I think the easier it is to avert problems later on.
I suppose it's just a key thing that people need to be aware of going into this process, is that it's a possibility.
But as someone just commented, that you just really can't please everyone. So, I mean, you've got to break some eggs to make an omelette, I guess. But, you know, that sounds a bit negative. But, yeah, I think it's just about doing your best.
What I found really helpful was Hannah's description right at the beginning of the different communities. I've written it down. Community isn't necessarily just geographic. And the community that we have is pretty big now at Old School. It doesn't have to be the geographic community, although that is important, but I thought that was very powerful, and thank you very much for that. That helped me a lot.
I think just worth to say that, I mean, there's this kind of like, so in some ways there's a romantic notion of community, of like, oh, the community, we're going to do this thing together. But actually, I mean, within every community, communities are made up of individuals as well, who all have their own different ideas. And so I think it's just a kind of creating housing as an opportunity to kind of enrich that community by collaborating. And sometimes that might involve terrible arguments or all sorts of tensions. But I think it's probably better to have those than to not do anything, because that's kind of is a tool for growth and empowerment and kind of, yeah, the richness.
I was going to say, we're definitely involving and having call on us the area of the community that have never been anywhere near, for instance, a parish council. They are the opposite to what might be called the high street. Yeah, there's quite a social divide.
Yeah.
And the needs are in that area.
Yeah, I'm just aware of time. This is such an interesting conversation, but I just wanted to see, Colin, if you had any sort of closing thoughts that you wanted to add in.
Yeah, okay. I've just quickly reformulated my thoughts into the framework of closing remarks. So I guess there's a few things I'd like to say. I'm going to try and stick to just 3 points. And for those of you that know me, normally when I say I've got 3 points, I say here's one, here's the second one. I've forgotten the third one. I've written them down. So I thought it was both thanks to our guest speakers, both very interesting and very different cases, but highlighted quite a few issues in terms of how you gather your group and how you communicate with the rest of the community. And I think also today, we didn't mean to, but I think we've also done a little bit of showing other people how to cope with the technological wobbles you get with Zoom and any other format in current crisis. We're all stuck with these virtual meetings, and they can be quite challenging at times. So thanks for bearing with us. So my 3 points are this. First of all, Anna in particular, I thought, touched on a whole range of other issues in illustrating her points. And I just wanted to say, yes, this is a series of webinars. We're looking at other stages in the process. and many of those things will come up. Today we wanted to look at the sort of the group formation communication stage, but those other stages are also important. And I think Anna at the beginning had shown us the diagram we developed showing the 5 stages. But that diagram is how you'd like things to be in an ideal world, and real life tends to be more organic than that. And often, some of the group formation issues do sort of come up as you go along and as things occur. The second thing I wanted to comment on was this issue of how you deal with opposition. And I think sometimes community-led housing groups or any housing groups, never mind community-led, are faced with difficult choices and difficult compromises. And I think sometimes the reality of it really is, who is it you'd like to displease? When you make a decision, which group of opposition are you choosing to encounter? Because as someone said, you will not please everybody. There are going to be difficult choices, and it's not uncommon for particularly. I mean, I can really talk about in the rural environment. I guess the same sort of thing happens in the urban environment. It's not uncommon to find that you've got a very high proportion of people, let's say in your village or other community, who are in favour of, for example, let's provide more affordable housing, and then they find out where you're planning to put it, and some of them decide they're against it after all, and that's almost inevitable because you will upset somebody. Now, I think actually Rosemary is very, very fortunate to only have one family that wanted to lie beneath the bulldozers, because many groups will come across more than one, and sometimes the people who are upset or feel aggrieved are going to be the most vociferous and the most vocal. So
like Norton.
Yes, I wasn't going to talk about the Norton example, but you need to be prepared for it, I think, is the issue. And the third point I wanted to talk about was engagement, and I think we've concentrated on communication, and I think it's incumbent on any group, whether it's a community-led group or any other group, do what it can to communicate its ideas, its proposals, its plans to the rest of the wider community. But beyond communicating, there's also engagement, and I think both Anna and Rosemary referred to planning for real exercises. I think that actually shows us another step, that it's not just about talking about it and having a sort of a conversation, a two-way conversation. It's actually visibly demonstrating it and getting people active in doing that, rubbing shoulders, if we can remember the days when we used to be able to rub shoulders, but sort of metaphorically rubbing shoulders with each other and discussing the options. And the idea of having people plant flags in a homemade model in order to show where they think needs are or where they think the housing should go, really is more engaging than an article in social media or on a newsletter or a conversation at a parish council meeting or any other fora. I definitely say that engagement is the next step. And I think I'll finish on something Rosemary said, which I didn't expect, which was she said that stage was fun. I'd forgotten about fun. I worry so much about housing, but it can be fun too, and why not?
Yeah.
Oh, great thing to end on. Let's have fun with community housing. Great. Okay, I'm aware it's just 5 minutes over, but I think hopefully we crammed in as much of the good stuff as we could. I'm so sorry that there are a few questions that we couldn't get to. Hopefully what I'll do is I'll send all attendees a follow-up email with resources and things we've discussed, links to Anna and Rosemary's the CLT and Ecomotive and Ashley Vale, so you can delve in a bit further.
She's put another question down there. We can't answer it, but will you take note of these questions that have been...
I will. Yeah, absolutely, I will, and I'll make sure that that we can. I
just
can
make
get
it
Colin
twice as long next time.
So I know, well, this is it, isn't it? It's part of learning about what works and what doesn't work for webinars. Clearly, there's a lot to talk about. So yeah, do future webinars with more discussion time. But that leaves me to say thank you so much to Rosemary and Anna and Colin for joining me today to talk about the subject. Bravo, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar if you've booked to come along. But until then, have a lovely week and take care. See you soon. Cheerio.